Welcome to Difficult Conversation Africa broadcast. I present to you the host, Yinka Olaito.
My name is Yinka Olaito, and this is Difficult Conversation Africa podcast, a platform where we unpack issues that many are afraid to talk about. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to this episode where we'll be looking at a critical issues that is very essential to Africa as well as personal development. Today, in an uncertain world, there are a lot of issues that we face, but we must continue to survive. We must continue to make the required progress despite all the challenges around us. I must also say that our world has its own challenge, and we must be able to resolve it. Bringing the dynamics together is really important. And in today's episode, we'll be looking at the issue of business, technology, society, and geopolitics, and the challenges of merging and balancing this together. For many, it has been a very difficult thing. And for me, I appreciate the fact that I have an expert today who is very grounded in all these issues. And it is my privilege to welcome my guest today. His name is Per Ostberg, and he's a South African-based leader and a coach. And he comes with a lot of knowledge in managing relationship between business, technology, society, and geopolitics. Welcome to the platform, Per Ostberg.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so happy that in your work, you have been able to shift a lot of mindset towards the future of our economy, where boardroom to policy and Silicon Valleys to emerging markets, and you have been able to relate all this intersection together and help leaders to actually position for the opportunity that we have. So I will go to the first question. The first question is eagle-eye view or a long-term view. How do you see relationship between technology, business, society, and geopolitics?
Yes, so this is a really interesting aspect, a really interesting development have happened. It used to be that politics was one track, society was one track, business was another, etc. Right? But nowadays it has all merged and become one thing. So, for example, you look at how America or the United States is using financial measures for geopolitical gains and shifts. Look at their tariffs, for example, and how they allow NVIDIA to export their CPUs or GPUs to China, but then the state want a part of that profit. So the borders are starting to blur. But society-wise, for great technology to spur and to come up, you need a free education, you need a free research, you need people and institutions to be able to do what they are doing themselves, to find out what they can, rather than directing the research to certain areas. So it's a very interesting mix that goes on at the moment. It's a blurred line, I would say.
Rare is a blurred line. So how do we separate the lines? How has it been with you?
Yes, so as businesses, we need to we can't only focus on the art of business. We need to be politically astute. We need to be able to read the room when it comes to geopolitics, when it comes to national politics. We also need to look around us and look at society and our role in society, because we can't keep on just the old adage of you extract value and you deliver the value to your shareholders or to your executives. That is long gone. We need to, as businesses, we have a societal rule or a role in where we operate to make sure that everyone around us benefit from our activities, be that nature, be that the community, be that the nation, be that the world and the planet itself. And that the blurred lines will not be unblurred. They're probably just going to be much more interlinked than they have been before. And we just need to live in this new way of doing business.
Yeah, I like the insight that you share, Pars. Let's look at drivers of change, which is the next question. For you, what are the most significant global trends currently shaping the intersection between business, technology, society, and geopolitics?
So I would say that it's basically four main drivers of change at the moment. One is climate change, and it is something that's going to affect both the society, business, and nations, and we need to find business solutions and societal solution and technical solution to how we as a species, how we survive and how we thrive in this, right? If you look at the geopolitical side, which is the second part, we are looking at there's a breaking of rules going on. It used to be the international laws about sovereign states and borders, etc., has now become more transactional. It's like, no, I want this, so I take that. It almost feels like we've gone back to the time when we had small, petty, greedy kings and robber barons taking what they want and not following the rule of law, right? And that is something that is happening. And what we need as businesses to navigate that change is we need to diversify. We need to have a diverse supply chain, but we also need to have a diverse client base, and we need to have a diverse workforce that can actually do the job. So wherever the disruption happens, we can still survive. Thirdly, AI and technology, of course, but it's going to change. It is already changing our lives and how we work and how we do. But I think it's a bit too much fear mongering. It's too much of, AI is going to solve every problem we have, and that is not the case. It is AI will solve the problems we need to solve, but we need to be very specific in how we do it. There was an article that came out in Harvard Business Review that 95% of all AI projects fail because they're just trying to AI-ify current ways of working instead of rethinking what do we actually need done and automate that with AI, right? So that's one thing. And lastly, there seems to be the big change that is driving the narrative at the moment is this global leadership, narcissism, and myopia, believing that there's only one truth, there's only one person, and it's only for us. It's like we're going back to that inward-looking worldview instead of having an open society. And those are the changes we as business people need to cater for and be able to handle.
I like the point you raised about AI, that it may just be about fear mongering. And I think it is something that we must pay attention to. AI impact is there. And that is taking us to the next question, which has to do with business strategy. Now, how should business leaders adapt to their strategy in a world where geopolitics and technology increasingly dictate market realities?
That's a really difficult one. It very much depends on what industry you are and where you're located. But I would say that's generic or general rules. We need to be much more nimble as our strategy. We also need to understand and realize that there's not only one future. There's many different futures that can play out, and that we as executives and businessmen and owners of industries, we have agency in changing the future. We can make the future that we want. And it takes time, it takes effort, etc. But we need to look 10, 20 years ahead while making sure that we are focusing on the day-to-day. And lastly, most disruptions in industries happening not within the industry itself. It always happens in an adjacent industry or somewhere totally from left field. So we need to look sideways, not just internally in our industry, but we need to look sideways in society and see what's happening. It was almost, I mean, the ideal would be to have one team that just sits and look at what happens in 20 years' time. Another team in your company is sitting and just trying to break what you're doing. How can we do this cheaper? How can we combine this with something else? How can we disrupt ourselves, right? While you then, the majority of the company is working and making sure that the day-to-day operation is efficient and makes revenues, because that's what pays our bills and what pays the future.
Yeah, that's really insightful. Again, I think that as we have noticed, technology is really important. Now, let's look at technology role in all these dynamics of the events as they unfold. And my question is, how is emerging technology, especially AI, blockchain, balance of power between reforms, business, and society? What are the interplays that you see?
So there are really, I would say I think there's three nodes to this. One is the raw material, if you start at that point, right? We have one node is the entity or the country where the raw material for these new technologies that is needed, where that belong, right? And then the other side of that same node, so to say, is who controls that raw material. We can take, for example, from Africa's perspective, a lot of the world's rare earth minerals, etc., that we need for the future, the green tech, the EVs, the batteries, and so on, exist on this continent. But we as nations or societies are not always controlling that ourselves. We have handed that over to foreign entities from China, from US, from Europe to mine it, ship it out, and then make value out of it, which leads us to the second of the node. It's the skills needed to make to profit from these new technologies, be that software engineering, be that metallurgic experts, etc. We need to have that in the continent, while at the moment it feels like we very much have abdicated that as well to outside. So that then leads us to the third node, which is that business and business interests are more and more dictating where the nation is going. So, for example, let's take the mineral access to minerals again. US trade, they say that we want to invest and help countries that are friendly with us. It's not about being nation building, it's about access to these minerals that dictates, are there more development aid coming, are there more business investments coming, etc., right? So the role of a technology is very much linked, is interlinking with the nation's direction very much at the moment.
Yeah. Now, you've nearly touched the next question, which is geopolitics. Now, the environment is changing. Look at U.S. trade wars and all that it pertains, and that is gradually spreading across the Western Europe, Canada too, with a lot of tax wars and all of that. So the impact of that is very, very vital. And that's why it is important to get your view about geopolitical tensions. In what ways do conflicts, trade war, and regional rivalry influence corporate decision making and innovation for you?
It comes in with these blurred lines we talked about a little bit earlier. It's that as a corporate now, we can't even rely on trade agreements between nations being stable, which means that we need to, as businesses, we need to have multiple suppliers. We need to start looking at how can we make sure that we are not reliant on only one supplier from one region or from one geopolitical bloc, if we may use that term. But at the same time, we need to also look at alternative markets. We can't just rely on one market. And I mean, a great example is, for example, South Africa and fruit and wine industry that very much was geared towards Europe and to US, right? And now when you have these high tariffs on it, what do? We need to proactively diversify the supply and the client base of our businesses. So risk nowadays is not just financial or reputational. It's also about losing the supply to your products or losing the market. And without the supply, you can't deliver anything. You can't do your business. Without the market, what's the point of doing the business, right? So we need to look at it in a very different way. We need to be more proactive in finding new markets and new suppliers.
That's fantastic. Now, let's look at the impact of society on businesses. And my question has to do with societal impacts. And how can business and policymakers ensure that technological and geopolitical changes create inclusive benefits rather than depressing inequality?
Yeah. So I might sound like a raving socialist here, and I think it could be something about that. Most societies that have been extremely successful in the world or had an enormous high development level and so on are societies that are equal, not only equal in rights, but also equal in financial abilities. So if you look at from a policy side, we need to be able to distribute the benefits of the work done in the country, a country's resources, be that human resources, great industries, or raw materials. Basically, we need to start taxing the businesses more and distribute these taxes into education, so we have more businesses growing, healthcare, so people and security, so people don't need to start looking over their shoulder all the time, but can actually looking forward. What can we do? What can I do with this idea, etc. Right? And we need to create and storing wealth for future generations. Like we have various sovereign wealth funds where, for example, I think the Norway's is the most famous one, where they took a conscious decision that, yes, we have found oil, and yes, we are very, very rich, but they realized that the oil will not last forever. So what do we do then? We can't just blow the wealth we are generating now. We need to store that wealth somehow for the future. Investment vehicles and so on, right? Saudi Arabia have it, a lot of countries have it, but we need to make sure that we actually looking not just at our current needs, but what are the needs 30, 40, 50 years ahead. Because whether we like it or not, the raw materials we have, they will eventually run out. They will be harder or more expensive to extract, right? And if you look at another impact on society, and that is a little bit about the openness of the political landscape at the moment. If we want an open access to market, to travel, to ideas, and so on, we also need to becoming more neutral, or either we are neutral and then we deal with that, then we are properly neutral, right? Or we align ourselves with a bloc of, will that be the old West, or if it's the global South, or whatever the bloc is. But we need then to understand the consequences of that, not only for business, but also for society. Are we associating, say, South Africa or Africa associating with the Old West? Well, then a lot of the opportunities coming out from the global South and China and India will be blocked for us, and vice versa. We just need to understand the consequences of these strategic decisions.
Thank you. One thing that stood out for me is the fact that foresight is essential. Thinking ahead, looking at the big pictures. I think there are major points that you have raised in that your feedback, and maybe that will lead us to the next question, which has to do with risk and resilience. Now, what risk should organization prepare for at the intersection of these forces, the forces of technology, geopolitics, societal factors? In your own field, what risk or what kind of resilience position should businesses prepare for as we go on and on in this uncertain economy and uncertain world we live in?
Yeah, so I think we have there's a lot of risks going on at the moment, but I would say we have at the moment there are three major risks. One is the climate risk. It's not only like a risk, it might happen. It's more a question of when will it happen? Are we going to have a drought this year? Are we going to have massive rainfall and flooding? Are there going to be dust storms, crop failures, and all that, right? So we need to invest in alternatives and mitigating factors that help us survive. So we have multiple supply for food. We grow crops that are are resilient. We instead of having the country dependent only on one main crop, that we start diversifying crops that handle different climates differently and so on. So that is number one. Number two, and this is a bit of a sad one, I think war, social, either whether it's physical or trade war, is a really big risk, and that is going to become even worse than it is now. We have a lot of wars already going on, and if we are not careful, these can spread and becoming more regional or bigger conflicts. And there, resilience-wise, we need to diversify again. So diversification, both on the client and the supply side, I think is important. And then it's also with all these stresses of unemployment, we have stresses of AI and the risk and the narrative that AI is going to take our job and what shall we do and all that. It's about social upheaval, where that journey from when you grow that you cannot become successful, when that channel, when that avenue of having future success, when that doesn't exist, then people's going to start looking at, okay, what's happening now? What can I do, right? So those are the things, I think the three. The climate, it's one type of war or the other, and then social upheaval where the fabric where the current rules and so on are not benefiting the big masses.
Yeah, but in the midst of all this, past, one thing that is certain is the fact of the aspect of ethics and responsibilities in business. The dynamics are there: technology, society, geopolitics. But there are business ethics and responsibilities. And therefore, my question will now be on that. Where does corporate responsibility come in when navigating between profit, technology, and societal goods?
I would say that ethics and responsibilities are, or like social responsibility, is at the core. As we said earlier, the time when only getting value out of your business and giving it to one entity, the shareholders, that is past. That is an old and outdated philosophy. Because corporates don't exist in vacuums. If society or the community around the business don't like the company, you're not going to get good workers. You're not going to get people who are motivated to work there, and it's going to slowly drag it down, right? So technology has to be a cornerstone for a corporate to be efficient and have efficiencies going on and being able to do scale and so on. But it also needs to be responsible. We can't just automate away humans without giving these humans an alternative. What else can they do? I mean, a lot of people, I see articles that, was it Salesforce? Now they're going to get rid of 4,000 people because of AI. But why don't we change that narrative and look at it as, right, we have implemented AI. Now we got 4,000 people who can do more, who can do other things for us, right? So instead of having AI or humans, we should think of AI and humans, or rather humans and AI. And yeah, that's I think what the main message is that I think we need to look at.
Yeah, and maybe because of our time, let me ask you this question. Looking at the future outlook, what skills, what mindsets or policy will be the most critical for leaders in navigating the challenges created by technology, geopolitics, and societal impacts?
So let's look at the mindset first. I think leaders must be much more open and much more world aware. And we need to, as leaders, look at and understand that what's happening in China affects us here in Africa, and vice versa, right? So we had to be curious. We had to be nimble in the sense of not being stuck just because you have taken a decision and you have invested in that, maybe money or maybe time. If it's proven that this decision wasn't right, admit it, recoup and restart, right? Because way too often we are stuck in that, oh no, we can't change. We need to be able to change, and we need to be able to allow change, because what looks right today, the way the world changing in 2 years' time, that might not be right. And then we need to be mature as business owners and executives to say, right, we had to cut our losses on this. That was good. It didn't work out. Let's move on because the world has changed, right? So we need to be embracing multiculturalism, because we're going to have more and more people from different culture in our organizations, in our client bases, in our supply chains, right? There's an open mind is basically what's needed. On the skill side, we need to start being more systems thinking, understanding that we not exist in a vacuum. We need to start looking at and analyze, if I do this, what is then the second and third and fourth level effect of that? What are the unintended consequences of me doing this? I mean, a great example is that we go back to Nvidia again, and we look at that they were blocked from selling their processors to China. So what do China then do? Well, now suddenly there's a reason for them to invest both time and money in creating their own chips. And suddenly there is now a cheaper version of chips to run AI than Nvidia's. So that was an unintended consequence of that, right? Foresight skills, we need to be much more looking further ahead, looking at signals, looking at what could happen, and being open to that the world have many, many different futures. And as we go along, we might see that, okay, this disappeared, that's not going to happen, but these two, these are the ones that now look more promising, and we follow that, right? So it's that kind of thinking. And then on the policy side, to conclude, it's more that it needs to be more inclusive. We need to make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind, both technology-wise, education, access to resources, healthcare, education, and so on, food. It's about inclusion of people to think more being human, actually. I think it's a good term for it.
Paz, thank you for your insight. I'm happy that you have been able to help us to unpack this, and I'm sure that our listeners will have a lot of takeaway from what you have shared. Once again, Per Ostberg is a futurist, a keynote speaker, a foresight skill coach, a future strategist, a storyteller, and author, and also a CEO of, as well as co-founder of 2 or 3 companies based in South Africa. And from his experience, he had helped us to see the relationship between society, technology, business, and geopolitics in our world. And in his feedbacks and answers, every leader should learn a lot from what he has said in terms of being looking forward and knowing the drivers that drive the economy and business landscape within Africa and globally now. Paz, I want to say thank you for coming on the show, and I hope that we will have a follow-up session to this. On this note, our listener, we just want to say thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and don't forget to follow us on our podcast website, which is www.difficultconversationafrica.org. See you in the next episode. Once again, thank you, Paz, for your time and your insights.
Thank you for listening to this episode. For inquiry, please send an email to info@difficultconversationafrica.org. Telephone 0809 3160 591. Please follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Difficult Conversation Africa. See you soon.